Okay, so we are going to get started as people tend to trickle in on a Friday afternoon. I am so grateful to have two wonderful panelists here for today's workshop titled Endless Possibilities, the Paths to a Career in and Not There, Out of Marketing. And so, featured today we have Miss Claire Baum and Miss Simone Klein, both really incredible individuals. Um, and I think it's really great to have you both. So we just want everyone to know that this is being recorded. It is being shared on our YouTube page, and we'll kick it off with Claire. I'm going to ask that you introduce yourself, tell our students and those who are coming in who you are and what you would like for them to know.
Yeah, I'm Claire. I am a growth lead at Ampush, which is a fun way of saying that my job is to help companies grow. I work in kind of like the quantitative side of marketing, sort of the hard science. I went to Cornell with these two lovely ladies, Simone and Imani. Um, and yeah, if you ask me anything about working in startups, working in tech, and working in technical marketing.
Wonderful. Thank you for the incredible introduction. And Simone, will kick it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Simone Klein. I went to Cornell, as Claire said. That's how the three of us met. And there I studied industrial and labor relations, which definitely isn't a usual pathway to marketing. You usually get people who studied business or marketing specifically. And I, wanted to get into corporate strategy. So I went into market research, did that for a few years, and then had a variety of other marketing positions, and currently I'm the director of digital marketing at Press Ganey, which is a healthcare services company, specifically in patient experience and workforce engagement. So that's what I'm doing now.
Well, this is wonderful. This is exciting to have known both of you for almost going on 8 years. Pretty impressed with what you've accomplished. And so we're going to get started and really just take a step back, really more like a stroll down memory lane. Let's talk about high school. Um, that feels like it was just a few days ago and also ages ago. So we'll start off with Claire. Could you tell us a bit about classes that you took, maybe some of the guidance and resources that you sought out, and extracurriculars, and how these things maybe apply to what you currently do or how they have nothing to do with your current career?
Yeah, for me, it's definitely nothing to do with my current career kind of angle. So I went to a small, kind of like artsy high school in New York City, where I'm from. And most of the classes I took in high school were just kind of gen ed courses. I was really interested at the time in veterinary sciences for whatever reason. At age 17, I was like convinced that I was going to be a vet. And that's actually one of the reasons why I ended up applying to Cornell because of the vet school. So I started off as an animal sciences major in college and made a pretty quick switch to actually the same major Simone just referenced, industrial and labor relations. Um, but in high school, most of my focus was in biology and other forms of like hard sciences. Um, and as far as guidance and resources, I had a guidance counselor assigned to me by my high school to basically to provide like a list of colleges that I might want to apply to. I didn't end up using that very much. I kind of used my own intuition, and I'm glad I did because at the time, a guidance counselor will ask you, "What do you want to do with your life?" At 17, I felt like I knew what the answer to that was, and it turns out I really didn't. And I told her I wanted to be a vet, and she gave me a list of schools that were really great in the sciences, but not really very focused in anything else. And at the time, I think if I had listened, I would have gotten pigeonholed into a path that ended up not being the right one for me. So I ended up applying to a bunch of different colleges that had science programs, but that also had other opportunities because I knew I was young and I was likely to change my mind. And sure enough, when I did, I was really, really glad that I went to a school that had a number of different options. Um, Also, most of my extracurriculars were related to animal care. That's an interesting one. I had built out this whole dog walking business in high school where I was walking something like 15 dogs, hired friends to walk dogs for me. I wrote my college essay on dogs. It's not something you would really know about me if you didn't dig too deep, but I really love animals. I just don't want to make a career out of them. So, yeah, I fell into marketing kind of just by accident, recruiting for my current role on the side when I was in college, and I just worked my way up once I got here, and I've really loved it. So I've been in my current role for almost 5 years.
I would just like to point out that you have a beautiful dog named Charlotte,
I
who
do.
I think is just adorable, and I get Christmas cards of. So I am so glad that you still get to have your share of animals and your love for them through Charlotte. We're actually going to kick it over to you, Simone, giving us a bit about your high school experience. Before we kind of think about college, we'll get there, but really just what classes did you take, or what happened in high school that helped us to get Simone J. Klein?
I loved high school. I think I definitely had a major life peak in high school. I was super involved. I did just about like every extracurricular that you could do. I was super into Model UN and a debate organization called the Junior State of America that was all student led. And I was like super, super into that. I did like debate weekends, I did debate summer camp, and I wanted to be a lawyer. So I was like really into taking poli sci classes, government classes, history. Um, and interestingly enough, when I look back on high school, one of my favorite projects that I remember was actually in my language arts class. And it was after the Super Bowl. Our like task was to watch the Super Bowl, watch the commercials, and then we analyzed all of the Super Bowl commercials. And it was about persuasion and what was persuasive about them. How were they written and formatted? That was supposed to get you to choose that Pepsi over Coke and all of that. And so, looking back now that I'm in marketing, I think it's so natural. And that if I had explored that more in high school and, had thought, oh, what do I like about this class? Maybe I would have realized earlier on that that was something I was actually really interested in. But I think that there's a lot of overlap because a lot of marketing is writing, is research, is trying to prove your point, is trying to make an argument. So I think a lot of my high school classes, though I wasn't taking them with that mindset, actually prepared me really well for where I am today, especially when it comes to, different types of writing or thinking through, what will make someone persuaded to buy something.
I think one, I want to thank you both for sharing your high school experiences. Simone brought up something that I would like to ask you both a bit about. Um, Claire, what's interesting is you started off wanting to, be in the science realm, be in that STEM world. I wonder, to Simone's point of, because of her focus of wanting to become an attorney, you made a great decision to not come this way. Um, I'm wondering if there were things you both might have been discouraged to do simply because you were a girl in high school, or if there were classes that you were told, oh, you don't have to worry about taking that, especially for Claire, given your interest in becoming a veterinarian. So I guess we'll start off with Claire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that veterinary science is sort of the one weird exception because it is majority female these days. But I definitely noticed that there was just less of an expectation that I might have an interest in something quantitative or like sciency. Sort of like the default assumption was that I was not, and if I was, that was something I needed to point out. I noticed that first when I was like in all the advanced biology classes in high school and applying to college. I noticed that a lot of people who I had seen on like all the college, I think college niche still exists. All those like message boards who were talking about the sciences were predominantly male, and that was one of the first things that stuck out to me. Is like, oh my god, I'm not a majority anymore. Um,
Right.
and then also just kind of like the level of confidence in your own quantitative skills is something I think is generally under enforced in women. And even now, I mean, I kind of work almost in this most STEM like sphere of marketing. My current team is like 70% male.
Well,
Uh, yeah, so it's pretty heavily male dominated for the marketing sphere. I think the one thing I guess I would remind people to do is just like don't let what other people have as expectations of what you should or shouldn't be good at determine what you're interested in. Figure out what you are genuinely interested in, what makes you tick, and uh, try as little as you can to pay attention to like what the norms around that are.
I love that this is like getting at hints of soul where they're like, find your spark. Um, so Simone, what about your experience with, maybe being encouraged or discouraged to explore things in high school?
Yeah, I would say it was, similar to Claire. Like I started out in elementary school and middle school doing really well in math and science, and being really interested in that. And I noticed over the years that became, less and less something that I was encouraged to pursue or felt really confident in my abilities. And, as you got to the higher level, especially math classes in my high school, they became, more predominantly male. I did an independent study in philosophy my senior year of high school with two other girls. And we were the only ones who did that. And it was in a very high level, like college level math class. We like sat in the back and kind of worked on our own stuff. But that class was, I think it had, 2 out of 35 of the people in it were female. So it was, those types of environments that nobody necessarily said, oh, you can't take these classes or you're not going to do well in them. But over time, as you saw that the people in those classes were overwhelmingly male, it became an environment that, subconsciously I just felt like I couldn't excel in those classes or succeed in those classes. So I think over time, I just started taking more language arts classes, more writing, more history, which I definitely felt more comfortable in, and that they were, a bit more diverse, especially in terms of gender. Um, and yeah, I think even to the point where senior year, I hated math so much that one of the reasons I applied to the major that I did is because it didn't have a math requirement. It only had a statistics requirement that I had already tested out of. So I didn't take a single math class in college, which is something that I really regret now because, as Claire said, marketing is really quantitative. And I feel that, if I had developed those skills earlier on, I would be in a completely different place in my career.
Yeah, I completely agree with I would like to echo, what you both have said. I unfortunately did actually take, I actually took Calculus 1. And if you both know, the curriculum that is made for engineers. And so that was a trap. But I'm so glad I did it because, I mean, even in the practice area of law, there are so many like quantitative skills that you need to have. People go into tax law, they go into so many different areas that you don't realize in broader career choice, you'll end up going back to some of these like basic skills that we learn about. Um, I want to say if you could go back to high school, knowing where you are right now, what are two classes you'd have made sure you took, whether those be APs or at least had taken seriously?
My high school had pretty limited options, but I think if I had had the option to take an economics or psychology class or something that was like a little bit less like primary color equivalent to like math, science, uh, history, whatever it is you do in high school, those four courses, I would have done that because that actually gave me a much better understanding of what I was interested. It was just like something clicked, and I was like, oh wow, consumer behavior is super interesting to me. Here are the two facets that are like psych and econ. I think are things that have more clear career correlations than a lot of like math, history, science. Like, um, so I wish I
Yeah,
had
no,
taken more of that.
yeah, no,
And I
I
think
took macro and stats in college, and those were my introductions to, I think, more quantitative uh, theory courses.
Yeah, for
How about
me,
you,
I
Sam?
would say I did take a statistics class, but I wish that I had like paid a lot more attention to it. I kind of just took it to check a box instead of actually caring about the subject matter. And that's something that, I took higher levels of that in college and wish that I had more of that foundation. And then I would say that I wish that I, did more to pursue creative routes earlier. I think it's really important to just giving a different perspective. I took a few video production classes, but I wish that I'd taken more of those because looking back, that's something that you don't really have access to outside of, an educational environment. And in college, a lot of those classes are reserved for people who are studying that specifically. So I wish that I had explored that more. And I think that's such an important tool set to have. Graphic design, too. That's definitely something that I wish that I knew more of now and would feel like I could do more on my own.
I definitely agree with thinking about marketing. I wish I knew how to do design. I just want to thank and shout out Canva because they make me feel more important than I know I am. Or they make me feel more skilled than I know I am for sure. And I think in high school, there really weren't many classes to take in terms of marketing. So I put myself through iOS training to make videos. And if you guys ever need anyone to edit on iMovie, right here, got you. But I'm sure that your companies um, give opportunities to have people help you do that instead of me. So, out of curiosity, what would you recommend to current high schoolers in New York City, where you both reside? Um, what opportunities or extracurricular opportunities, especially in this virtual world, would you recommend that they seek out right now?
So that's a tough one. Um, I mean, not to sound like a broken record, but I had a dog walking job, and it is a pretty pandemic friendly thing if you can find somebody to hand off a dog to you, or if you can find a way to do it safely. And I actually think that it was just super, super, super useful for me in order to like get organized about a business. Very low barriers to entry. If you can walk, if you like dogs, super easy to do. Put up a flyer in your building, put up a flyer in your neighborhood. That's how I got started. I wrote a neighbor a note when her dog died, and she offered for me to walk her dog, and it sort of started from there. I both made a lot of money for a high school student. I learned a lot about staying organized, um, and I actually kind of enjoyed it. And then I guess past that, uh, I dabbled a little bit personally in like HTML when I was in high school and making web pages.
Mm.
Um, I at the time I went to like an art school and I really liked fine art, and I never ended up. I knew I didn't want to make a career out of it, but I had fun making pages and I did a little bit of that when I was younger, just for fun. It's pretty. There are tons of accessible tools online. If you want something cool to show a potential college admissions officer, or just to put into a portfolio as a skill set, I would highly recommend building just some like online quantitative skills. They'll be useful not only for college but also for job applications and internships.
Yeah, there are opportunities like Girls Who Code. And I
Mhm.
think one of the things in terms of having a competitive edge, kind of going to Simone's point, is you can thrive if you have like a whole toolkit of skills, right? And you can say, hey, I think about actors, right? And those actors who can sing, dance, everything, and you're like, wow, you're like a whole show in one person. And I think when I think about a career in marketing, I could see how it might be helpful. How about at Ampush, are there opportunities for high school students to seek out internships, or are there other comparable companies that give high school opportunities?
I think we used to for college. Don't know that's the case anymore. I would say pretty much anywhere in digital advertising. There are very like few licensing requirements for most platforms. There's like few barriers to entry. If you can find a way to add value,
Mhm.
either by through like coding or even if you just have like interest in ad development or ad concepting, um, I would say reach out on LinkedIn if you have one. If you don't have a LinkedIn, good idea to just build one, build a connection. Um, and then I think a lot of people these days are just interested in helping high school students, especially if it's virtual, not a ton of effort required from a mentor. Just spells out to somebody what experiences you're looking to get and how they can help you, make it really easy for them to help you. If I were to get messages like that from a high school student and I had an opportunity I could think of on hand, I would be happy to help.
Yeah. No, I think that's important. A lot of high school students are afraid to ask, but more than that, don't even know that they can ask. And
Yeah.
so I hope that as a high school student, for those who are with us today, but those who are going to watch this on YouTube, whenever you watch this, I hope that now is always the good time to ask, whatever that now is. How they say now or never. That's a huge ultimatum, but honestly, sometimes it's a really great way to think, now is the perfect time. Um, we know that, uh, Simone, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about maybe opportunities that are available to high school students or opportunities that high school students should seek out, especially right now.
Yeah, I would say, even more important than finding an internship in, what your desired field is, I would say uh, my high school job, like I worked in an ice cream shop. It was the best job that I've ever had. I think about it every day. It taught me so much about how to work at a company, how to have bosses, how to schedule your time, time management, all of those skills that are so important to any job that you have. And it, shows people down the line that you're able to, hold a job, you're able to do the, what's asked of you, that you can, commit to something. I think any, job that you're interested in, that you're passionate about, that you can find is so good to have in high school because it just gives you all of the, building blocks. And I think that you can position things, down the line. Like I still have jobs that I had in, college. And when I was in college, definitely my high school jobs were on my resume, and you can position them to fit what you're applying for, because whether it's retail or service, there are so many things that you're interacting with different types of people, and you're managing inventory systems, learning new technology. There's a lot of applicable skills to any job that you'll have down the road. And I think that those can be like really fulfilling and just add to your maturity, which makes you a lot more well positioned later down the road, like when you're applying to different internships in college. And the other thing I would say is not to discount volunteer experience. A lot of my high school experience was, volunteering on campaigns and with different community organizations. And that definitely taught me, how different systems are run, how different processes work, and is helpful, even to me today with different projects that I work on. And then the last thing that I'd say is, whatever organizations that you're in that you're interested in, I would say trying to go for a leadership position. I think those skills are really invaluable in terms of project management, leadership, how to lead a group of your colleagues is something that is always going to be important when you're trying to, move up in your career and manage people. Building those skills early on are something that can differentiate you and that you just keep adding to over time. So the earlier that you can get into leadership positions, I think the better.
Yeah, no, I completely second that, Simone. And I think that's a perfect transition because you were definitely a leader in college. And so let's talk a bit about, we've already started to cover some of these things, so don't feel pressured to address any of them. We've talked about Claire's transition into ILR. And Simone, we've kind of addressed that as well for you. But in terms of, I guess, leadership, in extracurriculars. Did you both find that you joined organizations or you were able to grow through organizations that have much to do with your current careers and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
I would say not directly. Like I wasn't in any type of like business fraternities or marketing specific groups. I was in more kind of like student government leadership. I was in the leadership board for my sorority, and actually I was in a pre-law group. So kind of across the board, different things that I was involved with, but the skills that I got through those positions were like are things that I still use today. So for instance, I was the director of programming for Panhellenic, which is the governing board of sororities. And I threw events that, over 1,000 people attended, that I had to work with different parts of the university with, different campus offices, get approvals, have volunteers that, I assigned different things to market for them, get people to actually come to the events, make flyers, things like that, where it wasn't necessarily, a marketing club, but the things that I did were ultimately, marketing functions. And even when it comes to managing my team now or managing projects, a lot of these systems that I used then in terms of, how I will, matrix out what needs to be done and who's going to do them and all of that stuff were things that I was doing in college. So it very much transferred over and I feel like is really applicable to what I do now. And one of those other things looking back on it, I loved events. Well, events is actually a huge part of marketing and is, pivotal to our strategy now at Press Ganey, where we do a lot of client events. And so it's a team that I work really closely with. So, it's funny to look back on those things and think of how they relate to the job that I'm in now. And I think really set me up for success.
Yeah, I think, I just want to comment, Simone, this was not the first job you had out of college. And I'd like to think that this job is much more comparable with how you function in college, and like some of these skills that you developed as a leader. Truly, I see how they've transferred, but also I see from the small conversations that you and I've had over the past year, how you're much happier doing some of those things, right? So I think that's like really important for people to realize, whether you're in high school or whether you're in college, exactly how much you should pay attention to what you enjoy.
Yeah.
And Claire, I know when you go to speak, you'll also be able to speak to that. You both made transitions during our first, couple of years out of college. So Claire, I'll just popcorn it over to you to answer the previous question.
Yeah. So, um, I think my college level interests were like almost hinting at what I do now, but just like not quite there. I was a columnist for an on-campus publication called Slope Magazine. At times, like writing articles about music and other random campus stuff. I liked writing. I liked communicating with people. And I think that was sort of the budding interest there. I don't think I was super interested in like journalism, in hindsight. And then the other thing that I think was probably more central to my college experience was I worked in undergraduate admissions as an admissions ambassador, and I specifically led training for all the volunteers who worked at like an open admissions day for Cornell called Cornell Days. And that was like probably the first experience where I really got to know like what I would call real adult humans at the time who worked at Cornell. Um, and at the time, I was like, oh, maybe I like admissions, maybe I like recruiting, which was a popular career path coming out of our major in college. But what I really think in hindsight that I liked about that was I liked storytelling and trying to sell somebody on something, which is kind of what I was doing because I was working more in like yield strategies, which is a fancy term for getting people to enroll once they've become admitted. Um, so what I would recommend to any high school student is do whatever interests you, and you can always find a way to spin the narrative towards what you want to do next. Focus on what you're interested in, and use that as like a guiding path to what you want to do career wise. I think I really would have shot myself in the foot if I had just stuck with the first thing that came to mind. I was much better served by just naturally letting it come to me. And even in the moments when I was like a junior or senior in college, where I thought, oh my God, I don't know what I want to do. The reality was like I was young, it was early, nobody really knows, or I shouldn't say that. Very few people know firmly what they want to do at a young age. If you do, fantastic. If you don't worry about it. Just let it come to you.
Yeah. I think there are a good number, and I'm sure you all could say this. I have a good number of college friends who came in thinking one thing and are currently doing things that are so left field in comparison. One thing before we move forward, anyone would like to just again explain ILR? We have to be careful. We speak in our Cornell language. So let's just explain exactly what ILR is. I don't know if it's still its own separate school. I'm pretty sure it is.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so let's just talk about ILR. And I wasn't an ILR, so I'll kick it off. I was a development sociology major in the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. I minored in communication, which is why I'm very, very grateful to have them both here. And I got to watch Simone thrive in her communication skills. She helped me improve some of my own. And then I was also an inequality studies minor. So I'll kick it to Claire and then, yeah. On.
Industrial and labor relations is like a fancy way of saying studying the workforce and how the world of work works. So it's everything from collective bargaining, so employers bargaining with their employees,
Mhm.
to workforce dynamics, how many people you should hire, when you should hire them, how you should promote them, how you should pay them, um, to like more macro level, like economic questions about the workforce at large. And I think there was also a good portion of our major that was interested in law and history, which is
A
another,
large portion.
yeah. Um, I think the angle that I took with ILR was there was a facet of ILR called organizational behavior, which is kind of like the psychology of how people work together and how an organization functions. And that was always by far the most interesting to me. And that like lended itself well to the psychological components of working in marketing, and understanding people's internal motivations. I think like one of the first things that I learned from ILR, organizational behavior, was just kind of like psychological norms, like norms of reciprocity. So like there's this psychological term where if I offer you something, you're inclined to offer me back something.
Mhm.
Um, and like a good example of that is you might see ads that say like get 50% off today. And I think the like initial response, oh my God, they're gifting me something. I should gift them something back by committing to purchasing whatever item is being marketed towards me.
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting way to think about marketing. I'm one of those people. I fall for the 50%. I'm like, oh my gosh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
Simone, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think that was like the perfect way to sum up our major. So yeah, I was one of those people that went into it and was like, oh, there's a bunch of law classes, history classes is going to be perfect. And then, I realized that I didn't want to do 3 more years of school after that and started kind of seeing what else interested me. Um, and one of the things that I really loved about our major is that there were a lot of classes on gender in the workplace, things that make disparities, for people of different backgrounds, or protected classes. And so that's really what I studied the most. And I think that even though, the tangible skills or like facts that I learned in college may not apply to what I do every day, it taught me how to be in the workplace and how to advocate for myself, and how to get the dynamic that I want, what to look for in a job, and then also how to build that. So I spent a year at a startup where I was, building my team, where I was doing a lot of things that impacted the culture. And so I would bring a lot of what I learned it through our major into that and try to, set it up to be, a more equitable organization, one that motivated people, and made people, want to go to work every day. And I'm setting up a team now where I'm using a lot of those same skills and, trying to help with career pathing and all of that. I feel like I very much learned, and I kind of take for granted because I had so many classes about them, and I realized that most people don't. So it's something that I, have even just passed on to my friends, family. Like even my parents will call me and be like, "Can you read my resume?" or "Can you tell me what to say if I'm negotiating a job offer?" So things like that that are kind of intangibles, but have really helped me be an employee and, hopefully even establish and run a company one day.
Yeah, no, I think you both. Well, Claire doesn't necessarily always have a choice, but I think you both should definitely be, if you aren't already, spokespersons for ILR, because as someone who almost transferred into ILR, I think the network of ILR is really phenomenal, and it's very varied. You have a lot of folks who are like the vice presidents of HR for many, many top companies who have graduated from ILR, but also law schools know a lot of individuals. And then I think there's a sect of marketing folks that's forming. I know that
Mhm.
ILR had a sports group.
Yeah.
If I'm correct, I remember there was a sports group. Another reason why I almost transferred in. And so I'm glad to hear that you both got a lot out of your major and it's playing into your current careers. So we're going to move on to um, not necessarily professional school, but if you could choose a professional school, which would you have chosen? I think you both are very business savvy individuals.
Mhm.
I know, for you both, you had more analytical positions after college prior to your current positions. Did those require professional degrees, or are you glad that you didn't go and get another degree? Do you feel like you need one for what you do? I'll start off with Claire.
Yeah, I definitely need one. The I mean, if you can, I think in tech, unfortunately, one of the big factors is where you went to school. And if you can find an alumni in whatever company that you're interested in, reach out to them personally. I found that to be a very effective route. I know that's not an option available to anybody, but everybody. But if you can find like some common thread with somebody who works at a company you're interested in, I often find that's a good way to get foot in the door. Pretty easy to find that from LinkedIn. Um, if I were to like go over and think back on college majors and what I would do again, I loved ILR and I probably would have stuck with it, but my second choice would have been something else broad, like policy analysis and management was another common major where I went to college, as was human development. And if you don't totally know what you want to do, I would stick broad and then narrow as you go. If you have an idea of what you want to do, you can always narrow kind of at any point, but it's harder to do the opposite. Um, so yeah, professional school. Do you mean like colleges or do you mean
No, I mean, what type of masters would you have pursued? I mean, you mentioned policy, and
oh,
so
yeah,
like, if you said that you do need extra credentials in your current role, and I think that's fascinating when you're in marketing, how sometimes having extra degrees, like there are people who have MBAs who then go into marketing, and so for both of you, I know that you both don't have extra degrees, so I
yeah.
would love to, yeah.
An MBA would have been helpful. It's not necessary. The first analyst that started working on my team when I like got my first team had a master's in finance, which was also super useful. Again, one of those degrees that sounds pretty narrow, but it's actually pretty broad because pretty much any company is going to value somebody who's good with numbers and good at managing money. So I think if you want to think about something that's specific, but can also get you a lot of places like finance, economics, statistics, anything remotely quantitative, but that also has a social component.
Yeah. For me, I definitely want to get an advanced degree at some point. I haven't figured out what or when that's going to happen. But there's, a few different programs that I'm looking at to kind of like broaden my skill set and help me in areas where I feel like I'm not necessarily getting on the job training, or I feel like I'll be, a better candidate for positions if I have more of an expertise in a certain area. So I'm still trying to figure out, exactly what that looks like. But I see people of all backgrounds, like people that have, masters in statistics, people that have masters in, public affairs. In Because I work at a healthcare company, a lot of people have, masters of public health, MBAs. I've even worked with people, in sales and marketing who have law degrees. So it's really kind of across the board what people use to get at different places. What I would say is like one of the nice things that's like kind of flexible about marketing is you definitely, don't need a certain degree to get to certain positions. And you can, add them on at any point and they're always going to help you. So I have a lot of friends that, are now starting to go back to school to get additional degrees to get to that next level in their career, or if they want to switch to a different industry and that'll help them do that, whether it's through, a certain degree that you need, or even just the people that you'll meet in that program who are more in that field. So it's nice to kind of figure things out while you're starting your career, and then, know what degree you need or what you need to do to get to the next place that you want to go, and then pursue it rather than kind of just going blindly into an advanced degree without even working in the field, and then realizing later that you want to do something else. So that's kind of where I am right now.
And I think just to add to what you both contributed, it is important to note for our current high school students, I mean, and for some of our current college students who will watch this later, because we do have, first and second years who are part of the TGTW community, that there are companies that prefer you come in after college and then they'll pay for you to get an advanced degree. So it's kind of like you don't know what you need until you need it
Yeah.
type of situation. I think one question before we move forward for you both is, this program is geared towards New York City high school students. You both are currently working in New York. Do you think that if you would have gone to the West Coast uh, after college in the same industry, at least for right now, you would have pursued a professional degree? Because I know that tech in San Fran is very different than tech in New York, or healthcare. Is healthcare in San Fran?
There are definitely some digital health companies out there, but and you get some like really good conferences and different organizations that are there. But there's a really thriving healthcare scene and even digital health scene that's in New York. So I would say most of the and the Midwest. Actually, my company is based in Indiana, and
Okay.
the Chicago area gets a lot of companies that are out there. So it's kind of all over. But I'm very partial to the New York digital health scene.
You love New York. And Claire?
Yeah, I actually spent a good portion of my, like, first 2 years out of college working in San Francisco. I work for a bicoastal company. I was staffed on a project in San Francisco for almost 2 years, and I spent about every other week flying back and forth to San Francisco.
You were
So I
very
feel like
busy during that
I
time.
was
I
so
actually remember that.
I was never here. I felt like my poor New York apartment was so, abandoned. Um, but I don't know that it would have made a huge difference for me personally. I think a lot of tech companies, if you can prove that you have the skill set, that takes precedent. And I've actually seen a number of employees that we have who they've come a couple years out of college, haven't necessarily have marketing related experiences, took like a general assembly or some sort of other online boot camp, and have been able to successfully make a pivot that way. Um, it varies by company, so I don't want to state this like for certain, but like the way I was hired was I didn't have a quantitative major. I just told recruiters like, look, if you've got this quantitative component, give me the same quant test you're going to give anybody else, and if I can pass it, like let's stop talking about it. And it worked out pretty well for me. Like I was not a quantitative major, but I took the same quantitative exam that they had all their regular interviewees go through. And that worked out well for me. So if you're trying to get your foot in the door and you don't have the experience that you necessarily need, I would recommend asking for something like that if you can. Just ask for a shot. You'd be surprised by how many people say yes.
Yeah, I think one of the running themes of today's workshop has been ask, ask, and people are very likely to help. Um, so we know that you both have changed your mind along the way. I think we've discovered that. So instead of kind of addressing some of these uh, bullet points, I think we'll speak to two of them. The first being your company's current reputation and a day in your life, if you can sum that up in a short period of time. And then, are you currently in your position because of your passion or job security or both? So we'll start off with Claire.
Um, yeah, so company reputation, geographic considerations. I knew I
Mhm.
wanted to come back to New York,
Mhm.
so I looked for companies mostly in New York. I was kind of pleasantly surprised by the ability to do a bit of both coasts, but I wouldn't say that's the norm. Reputationally, I kind of thought I was going to go into management consulting my senior year. That was what I had at the time landed on, and that was super important to me. I did a bunch of this like typical consulting interviews, case studies, and I had a consulting offer, and was sort of down to the 11th hour of deciding between that and my current role. And at the time, I mean, I was joining a startup. There was no reputation. There was nothing to be known. But I took a look at what they were doing, and I kind of could like take a guess at where the trajectory would go. And right now, Ampush is sort of like the leader in the direct consumer growth space. So I've actually been looking around. I'm probably going to make a career move just to a different company sometime in the next year or two. And a lot of recruiters I speak to now recognize the name and like know the equity. So reputation is not something that's stagnant. It changes over time. So I'd keep that in mind if you're looking at companies. And security wise, I definitely took a bit of a gamble because I worked in startups. Um, one thing I'll say to students who are coming from most of the New York City area is you have a huge advantage when you're coming out of college or when you're looking for jobs in the sense that you're already from an area with a lot of jobs. So if something does not go the way you need it to go, um,
Mhm.
if you are able to live at home or take that like security from your home environment, that may be an asset to you. I would recommend doing that. One thing that I did my first year out of college was just live at home, and it was a good opportunity for me because I knew that if any point I wanted to switch jobs or like take a gamble financially, that I wasn't concerned about my housing. So if you're from New York City, I would recommend that if you are comfortable with it and have the ability to.
Simone?
Yeah. So in terms of, company reputation, that's definitely something that changes. And also, um, it depends on the industry and, if people know it. Like I started my career at IBM that to most people, I mean, honestly, to people who are watching this, you probably have no idea what IBM is. To most people in tech, it's, still a pretty big name. They do a lot of, business to business type of technology. So a lot of different like computing systems, cloud servers, even some legacy hardware, AI, things like that. That power different companies and the platforms that a lot of startups use are built on those softwares. So it's still a really big name, and definitely made it easier to get a job after that. And then I went to a startup with 5 people that nobody ever heard of, nobody knew of, and then was able to get into a bigger startup, which was then acquired. And that's how I'm at the position that I'm at now. And the company that acquired us is a huge name in healthcare, but outside of healthcare, when I tell my friends or family, they haven't heard of it. So it really depends on what matters to you in terms of your job description versus your job title versus your company. And I definitely know people that want to just go for the biggest names, any positions they can get. They don't really care as long as they're at a big name company, like that's important to them. And versus other people who care a lot about what they're doing in the day to day, but not so much who they're doing it for, versus people who are a mix of those. So I think it just comes down to, what you value, what's going to make you happy and make you excited to go to work. And I would say more than reputation, I think like size and stage is really important. I started at a, huge multinational institution that had a lot of like it had been around for over 100 years. So there were clear pathways on how to get jobs and what everyone would be paid and what the projects are that we worked on and slower timelines. And then I wanted something that was a lot faster paced, that was hadn't been done before. So went to a startup. So it just depends what you're interested in, what sounds exciting to you. I think both are really good options, but definitely, with a startup or something like that, you have a bit less job security, but it can be a lot more rewarding as the company grows. So, for instance, at my first job, I was very much in an entry level position. I had been like promoted there, but I still had many layers of management on top of me. But it was very secure. Like it was, I knew that the risk of getting laid off was very low. I knew what I had to do to perform well. Um, Going to a startup, you don't really have that because, at any day your funding can kind of disappear. You're kind of, if you lose a huge client, then you can sometimes be dead in the water. You have to really trust the people that are managing the company, that they're going to make the right decisions, that, they have runway. Um, and but you can also have a much bigger role in building that. So I went to an executive level position, I was on the management team, I had people that I was hiring under me. So there's a lot of pros and cons, but I would definitely say a lot of the skills that I gained come from IBM and like the training that I had there and just the ways that things were done, that I think is really helpful and that I've taken with me. That I think if I didn't have something that was like that established to set me up, I would have just floundered a bit. And wouldn't have really known what to do at a startup environment where there's not a lot of guardrails. So I think both can be good, but just things to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that was really, really helpful for and insightful for a lot of you who are going to graduate from college and not go into a professional school or get an advanced degree. And some people really are concerned about making money after college or making money to kind of survive. And so you both went to really large companies that are very established. And I think regardless of whether or not someone has the means, that's always a good place to start, right? And even in professional school, like that is kind of the idea. You start big and then you can go wherever else you would like to go. Um, as we prepare to wrap up, uh, I would just ask if you have any parting thoughts, just so you know, we're going to share your information around. And today we have a small audience, but usually there are folks who reach out afterwards. And so, do you have any parting advice for our high schoolers or our current college students?
To follow your interests, as my parents always told me as a kid, figure out what you want to do first and figure out how to make it a career second. Find out what you're interested in, follow that. The money will follow, the structure will follow. It's most important that you find something that's sustainable and that makes you happy. And you can find a career path in almost anything. And if you can't, then build your own. Um, I like the idea, like you mentioned, Imani, of if you can, coming out of college, it can help to get your foot in the door in some place that is a little bit larger and has structure to the role. Because I just didn't really know what I was doing, and I was at a company that was thankfully large enough to have like a promotion cycle already figured out and like a rough idea of what that career path looks like, which was valuable to somebody like me who didn't even really know what a career path was until I was sort of thrown into it. So figure out what amount of structure is right for you. Err on the side of more structure when you have less experience, and vice versa.
It's a
Yeah,
great, yeah,
that's
decide
great.
more structure when you have less experience. I like that. Simone, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. I just thought it was all really great advice.
Yeah.
To add on to that, I would say um, just to um, make sure that you like trust your gut when you're interviewing and who you're interviewing with. Like these are the people that you're gonna work with, work for all day, every day. And work becomes such a big part of your life, even when you have, work life balance and, you have things outside of that and you're able to take time. Who you're working with can really make a huge difference on your mental health, on, how you feel every day. So, if you meet with somebody who's going to be your boss and you kind of get this feeling like, I'm not sure if I would mesh with them, but it sounds like my dream job, like, don't ignore that. Like, really pursue that. Try to have more conversations with them, different people on the team to kind of get a perspective. Because I've definitely had interviews with people, looked past it, and I should have trusted that and known if that was somebody that I was going to work well with or not. And I would also say, coming out of school, I was so concerned with like getting that perfect job, that knowing exactly what I wanted to do, having a 5-year plan, having a 10-year plan, and all of that completely went out the window. I think it's, less about trying to plan for the future and more about trying to find something that just makes you happy, makes you excited to get up every day, that you're interested in doing, that you know, just really, brings you as much joy as a job can. And know that your job like isn't everything. It's, a source of income. It could be a source of fulfillment, but I think trying to have hobbies and passions and things outside of that are really important to, just having a holistic view of, what your values are, what's important, and, what makes up and comprises of your life. And just to kind of, at first, it could be really overwhelming and feeling that you are, that it's everything and that, you're so caught up with that. But there's so much outside of that. And, it's a part of you, it's not all of you. And know that there's so many different points in your life cycle where you can have an entirely different career, go into a different field, pursue things that interest you, and that your first job or even your 10th job like doesn't define who you are, and you can keep exploring what you're interested in and keep adding on to your journey, and that no one role can like take away from that or make you feel like you're stuck in a certain job or a certain field.
Well, I just have to tell you, the chat for me and in general has been could I ask a question? Oh my gosh, she just answered it. Or go ahead, Simone, keep dropping that knowledge. And I can personally say, as even, as a moderator, I personally needed to hear some of those words as well. Because you both know me, and yeah, so definitely, again, references to Soul. I see it. Thank you, Disney Plus. But thank you, Simone, and thank you, Claire, for truly just adding to today's panel. If you've attended today's workshop, Sheena and Shanzana, please email us. You will get a gift for attending. And otherwise, for our panelists and for our guests, both present and future, please be sure to follow our social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and a YouTube channel where this will be posted. And our next session is laying down the law. Do you want to be a lawyer? I am also very excited for that because I have to think about how I'm going to say that. I've committed myself to the 3 year postgraduate experience that Simone was like, mm-mm, and I think she might have been wise. But I will also say I'm very passionate about what I do, and I couldn't see myself doing anything else. And I'm so excited for next week. So please be sure to join. With that, again, thank you, Claire. Thank you, Simone. I really, really enjoyed this. Cannot wait to share it. Do not be surprised if you get a few emails. From our students, and we really do appreciate your time. Tara, would you like to say anything? You're muted. Okay. um in the meantime, I will just say that Sheena had a quick question. Do you want to ask a question, Sheena?
No, I just like I think she answered it already. Thank you so much, Simone. I was gonna ask, like, in terms of like finding like, like a job that like something that you're passionate about, like what job like fits what you're passionate about. Like for instance, for example, like I'm passionate about history. Like, like I can't like, I want to find a job that like really fits what I'm passionate about.
Yeah,
So
I
to do
can. Oh, sorry. I can start answering that. But find the things that you enjoy. Like, if you like history, do you really like museums? Do you like going to museums? Like, is museum curation something you could be interested in? Is it more writing and research? You could honestly be like an author of history books there's so many parts of history that you can explore. Even if that's not your main job, I know people that do that on the side to just support their passions of parts of history that they're interested in researching and learning more about. What about history is it that you love? Is it storytelling? There's parts of marketing that relates to. That's definitely something that was an interest of mine in high school. And I loved like researching, and research is a huge part of marketing. So there's a lot of different things that try to explore, like, well, what about this subject do I like? Do I like the subject matter? Do I want to just keep learning about that? Or do I like the skills that I'm building, and what other ways can I use these skills? So I think also just where are at right now, just keep taking those classes, keep doing well in them, and then try to get into programs down the road that build on that, and see where they take you, and talk to your teachers, talk to your professors when you're in college, and have them introduce you to people that are in that field, and ask them about the professions that are there, and see if there are any projects that you can work on with them to keep exploring that. They might be able to draw you into different trips that are happening, or explorations, or different a book that's being published and needs somebody to work on. So there's a lot of different opportunities, and I would say if you have a teacher that you're really connected to, that you love their class and you just can't get enough, like, use them as a pathway to see what can be in that field that energizes you.
Well, thank you all so very much.